We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
Mr. Keating has said it all. Welcome to Sahitya Safari. And today, let's learn about the types of poetry. Guys, look at this lady here. It appears as if she is giving a rhythmical speech on stage. But can a speech be rhythmic? Of course it can be. It happens in dramatic poetry. It's like a play written in the form of a poem where characters talk and reveal their feelings and thoughts. Dramatic poetry is written and told by the character's perspective. This is a very important point because it is the essence of the dramatic poetry that the focus is on characters' mood, emotions, feelings, thoughts. It is structured like a play or monologue and it often lacks a linear narrative. What does that mean? It means that there is no definite beginning, middle, or end. It can start from anywhere. This type of poetry is primarily written to be performed, capturing the nuances, that means shades, of human experience through a dramatic framework. I have taken up some very popular examples here. The first one is My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Here are a few lines. That's my last duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder. Now, Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Beautiful, isn't it? Next is Alfred Tennyson's immortal piece, Ulysses. The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. We had this poem in our school and we really loved it. The last one is my favorite by my favorite writer, William Blake, and it's a collection of poems called Songs of Experience. In that collection, there is a poem called The Tiger. Here are a few lines. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burned the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? Oh, I wish I could do this all day. But moving on, we have narrative poetry. Because narrator's role is important in this poetry, we have a narrator here. So, narrative poetry is perhaps the oldest known form of literature. It dates back to pre-literate societies. That means it refers to the time when there was no custom of writing things down, and it relied on oral traditions to pass on stories and history. Most ancient epics, including Beowulf and the Odyssey, are narrative poems which were likely recited or sung from memory before eventually being written down and recorded. For centuries, narrative poetry maintained its appeal as a method of sharing information in an easy-to-memorize format. I think it was followed by every ancient society. This method was also popular in our country as well. Our gurus used to pass on information through shloks or mantras, right? So coming back to narrative poetry, it follows a beginning, middle, and an end. This is a quality which, if you remember, dramatic poetry lacks, right? And narrative poetry is structured like a short story or novel. Let's see some examples here. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Here are a few lines. At length did cross an albatross, through the fog it came, as if it had been a Christian soul, we hailed it in God's name. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work him woe, for all a word I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow. Guys, every example I have put here is a must read, okay? Next is The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. Now, to make things crystal clear, I have put a side by side comparison between dramatic poetry and narrative poetry. Okay? Let's see the purpose of each one. The purpose of dramatic poetry is performative, emotional depth. Okay? And in case of narrative poetry, it is storytelling. The structure of dramatic poetry can be a dialogue or monologue. In case of narrative poetry, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. The voice in dramatic poetry is of characters, and in narrative poetry, it is of narrators. Dramatic poetry can take up a form of soliloquy or a monologue, whereas narrative poetry can be an epic or a ballad. I hope this table beats every doubt and confusion. So, moving on, next is epic poetry. Oh, look at this puppy here. He's writing and writing and writing. Is he going to write an epic? I think he is. Well, let's see what epic poetry is. Epic poetry is a long narrative poem. Remember, we just learned about narrative poems? That tells the story of heroic deeds, legendary adventures, or significant historical events. It often focuses on the actions of a central hero who embodies the values of culture or society. These poems are pretty impressive in their range, style, and topics. They often deal with ideas about right and wrong, honor, and the battle between good and evil. Battle between good and evil, right and wrong? Does it remind you of something familiar in our culture? Of course it does. We have Ramayana and Mahabharata, and these are immortal epics, right? Okay, let's see some characteristics of epic poetry. If we talk about length, it can be extensive, meaning very long, often book length or longer, right? And the central characters are often larger than life heroes, like Ram, Arjun, Achilles, Odysseus. But who is the central character in Paradise Lost? Is it Satan? Is it Adam? Is it God? Well, that's debatable. Why don't you share your views in the comment section? I'd really love that. Let's look at some of the immortal lines of this epic. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate and courage never to submit or yield. And what is else not to be overcome? Can you guess who spoke these lines? It's Satan. Milton was really a genius. We also have our very own Ramayana by Valmiki and Mahabharata by Ved Vyas. Of course, I don't have to speak about their greatness, right? So moving on to the next poetry, lyric poetry. Look at this girl singing along with the birds. Well, lyric poetry also has similar kind of function. It's a form of poetry that expresses the personal emotions, thoughts, or feelings of the poet, often in a song-like manner. Unlike narrative poetry, which tells a story, or dramatic poetry, which includes characters and dialogue, lyric poetry is focused on the poet's subjective experience or emotional state. These can vary in length from a single stanza of few lines to lengthy odes hundreds of lines long, often rhythmic or melodic in nature. These are suitable for being set to music. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. These are beautiful lines by William Wordsworth and a very good example of lyric poetry. We also have Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats, Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. Now let's see what elegy is. An elegy is a poetry that expresses sorrow or lament, usually for someone who has died. It often reflects on themes like loss, mourning, and the passage of time, but can also explore broader meditations on life, nature, or human mortality. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rag, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. This is an elegy by Walt Whitman. It's a tribute to Abraham Lincoln. Okay. Next is Lycidas. It's an elegy by John Milton for his friend Edward King, a fellow student at Cambridge who died by drowning in 1637. Next is Adonai by P.B. Shelley. It's an elegy for his friend John Keats, who was also a poet. Next is In Memoriam A.H.H. It's an elegy by Alfred Lord Tennyson for his friend Arthur Henry Hallam, therefore A.H.H., who died of cerebral hemorrhage at the age of only 22 years. That's sad. Okay, so to lighten the mood, we have Shakespeare for you. We're going to learn about sonnets now, and Shakespeare has a big contribution in that. Let's see what that is. But before that, what is a sonnet? A sonnet is a 14-line poem containing a specific meter and rhyme scheme, typically written in iambic pentameter. I'm going to make a separate video on meters and rhymes, so no worries there. Okay? Sonnets often explore themes like love, beauty, nature, time, and human emotions. Now, there are two types of sonnets, Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet. Petrarchan sonnet is divided into two parts, octave of 8 lines and sestet of 6 lines. So 8 plus 16 is 14, which becomes a sonnet. Here is an example of Petrarchan sonnet. Yet do I marvel by County Cullen. Now Shakespearean sonnet is divided into 3 quatrains, that is 4 lines each, and a couplet, that is 2 lines. We have example of a typical Shakespearean sonnet by Shakespeare himself, Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? You can easily see the structure here, 3 quatrains and a couplet. Friends, you know who this is? This is John Keats, and I don't know any other author or writer or poet who has written as much odes as him in a single year. So let's see what is an ode. An ode is a type of lyrical poem that expresses deep feelings or emotions, often in praise or admiration of someone or something. Odes are usually formal, serious, and elevated in style, and they often explore themes like nature, beauty, or heroism. Now, odes are also of different types. Let's see the first one, Pindaric Ode. Pindaric Ode is named after the ancient Greek poet Pindar. It's a formal and elaborate style of poetry, originally composed to celebrate significant achievements such as athletic victories in the Olympic Games. Now, this ode typically follows a triadic structure. Let's see the first structure, strophe. What is strophe? The first stanza, where the chorus dances in one direction, it introduces the theme and sets the tone. Now here is an example of John Dryden's poem, The Alexander's Feast. The poem tells about the time when Alexander defeated the king Darius, and in the city of Persepolis, he arranged a feast, a grand feast in the honor of Saint Cecilia Day and celebration of his victory over Darius. Pay attention to the lines here. Soothed with the sound the king grew vain, fought all his battles over again, and thrice he routed all his foes, and thrice he slew the slain. The master saw the madness rise, his glowing cheeks, his ardent eyes, and while he heaven and earth defied, changed his hand and checked his pride. Do you see the rising tempo of the poem? This is what strophe is. This is basically setting the tone of celebration and victory. The next structure is antistrophe. It's the second stanza, mirroring the structure and rhythm of the strophe, but with the chorus moving in the opposite direction. It develops the theme further. See the lines. He chose a mournful muse, soft pity to infuse. He sung Darius great and good, by too severe a fate, fallen, 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 fallen from his high estate. On the bare earth exposed he lies, with not a friend to close his eyes. Notice the changing tone of the poem. Earlier, it was all about celebration and victory, and now there is pity for the defeated king. The third type of structure is epode. It's the concluding stanza with a different structure and rhythm, offering closure or a resolution to the theme. Okay? Basically, it concludes the poem. Thus long ago, ere heaving bellows learned to blow, while organs yet were mute, Timotheus to his breathing flute and sounding lyre could swell the soul to rage or kindle soft desire. At last divine Cecilia came, inventress of the vocal frame. I hope this made the concept clear. Now let's see a few more examples. You can also try to spot these structures in these poems, like The Progress of Poesy by Thomas Gray, Ode to Autumn by John Keats. The next type is called Horatian Ode. It is named after the Roman poet Horace, who developed this form. Unlike the grand celebratory tones of the Pindaric Ode, Horatian Odes are more personal, reflective, and meditative. They often explore themes of nature, love, friendship, and the simple pleasures of life with a tone that is calm, balanced, and philosophical. Ode on Solitude is a very good example of Horatian Ode by Alexander Pope. Let's see a few lines. Happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his own ground, whose herds with milk, whose fields with bread, whose flocks supply him with attire, whose trees in summer yield him shade, in winter fire. So there is a very peaceful, subtle, pastoral theme here, which talks about the merits of solitude in a country life. Andrew Marvell's An Horatian Ode upon Cromwell's Return from Ireland is another good example of Horatian Ode. The third type of ode is irregular ode. It's very easy to remember. No set pattern, free-flowing and flexible in form, often addresses personal emotions or contemporary issues. So this is what irregular ode looks like. Okay? Examples are Ode to the Confederate Dead by Alan Tate, Ode to the West Wind, a very famous and important poem by P.B. Shelley. We were just talking about pastoral theme in the Ode on Solitude. Now here is pastoral poetry. It's a literary genre that idealizes rural life, that means village life, and nature, often portraying shepherds and rustic landscapes in a romanticized manner. It presents a contrast to the complexities and corruption of urban life, that means city life, emphasizing simplicity, harmony, and the beauty of the countryside. इससे मुझे मनोज कुमार का एक गाना याद आ रहा है. मेरे देश की धरती सोना उगले उगले हीरे मोती, मेरे देश की धरती, मेरे देश की धरती, मेरे देश की धरती सोना उगले उगले हीरे मोती, मेरे देश की धरती, मेरे देश की धरती. That was cool. That's pastoral poetry, by the way. Another example is Christopher Marlowe's The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove, that valleys, groves, hills and fields, woods or steepy mountain yields. And we will sit upon the rocks, seeing the shepherds feed their flocks, by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. Another example of pastoral poem is Lycidas by John Milton. Although we saw this poem in elegy, but there is no hard and fast rule, because an elegy can be a pastoral poem and vice versa. And that is the reason it's called pastoral elegy. Next is Edmund Spenser's The Shepherd's Calendar, a renowned and celebrated poem. Okay, what's going on here? These words are arranging themselves into some kind of structure or shape, right? Let's see why that is. Okay, because of concrete poetry. So concrete poetry uses its shape and visual styles to enhance its meaning and artistic purpose. These poems often arrange words to resemble an image. They can also change how the poem looks by altering capitalization and punctuation, breaking words and sentences in unexpected ways, spreading words across the page and using white space to convey meaning and beauty. Amazing, isn't it? Let's see some examples. Swan and Shadow by John Hollander, The Mouse's Tale by Lewis Carroll, Mother to Son by Langston Hughes, Easter Wings by George Herbert. You can easily see the shape of wings and the shape of swan in these two poems. Ever heard a poem so bad it's good? Well, this is the quirky world of doggerel, where rhyme meets ridiculous. A doggerel poem is intentionally or unintentionally crude, simplistic, or overly irregular in rhythm and rhyme. These poems are often written for humorous, satirical, or whimsical purposes, and they tend to lack artistic merit in form or content. Despite their seemingly inferior quality, now we know why the puppy is sad. Doggerel poems can be entertaining and memorable due to their playful and exaggerated nature. Let's see some examples here. Samuel Butler's Hudibras, and we also have a limerick by Edward Lear. There was an old man with a beard. It is just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nest in my beard. That's all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos. This is me signing off. Till then, keep reading.